Good day, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to our panel on empowering communities through Web3 and decentralization. My name is Angelo Calao. I am part of the Cello Foundation, and today I am joined by Gabriela Chang from Ethic Hub and Ashley Taylor from Resource Network. And we're here to discuss about Web3. We imagine this session to be a learning opportunity, a conversation with everyone who's tuned in, just to see what's the potential of this technology. Everything's evolving really fast. Everything's also very exciting, and so like we want to dissect and make it more digestible to a wider audience, as well as let Gabriela and Ashley discuss the great work that they're doing to understand where we're headed and what's the work that we need to do to make this technology realize its full potential. And so I encourage everyone to be interactive. For those who are tuned in, swap card. You can always put your comments as well as like your reactions on the chat, as well as like your questions. And we'd love to address them. I imagine this conversation, Gabriela, Ashley, and myself will have a discussion maybe for like 30, 40 minutes. And then, of course, we'll open the floor for questions to respond to the audience. With that, let's get started. Would love to jump right away. So we're talking about Web3 and decentralization, right? And basically its nexus and like how it empowers communities. And then of course, this is the Financial Inclusion Week. We want to discuss how Web3 and decentralization can also help us achieve financial inclusion globally. So I'll begin with a request, perhaps like for Gabriela and Ashley to just introduce themselves and the organization they represent, as well as the work that they're doing. Maybe Gabriela, if you can go first.
Okay. Thank you very much, Angelo, Ashley, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for attending this and for your interest into what Web3 can do to improve the problems we have in the world. I'm Gabriela Chang, CSO and co-founder of Ethic Hub. I'm an industrial and product designer, an artist and writer, and I work for the Secretary of Economic Development in Chiapas, Mexico, and I was an organic coffee producer. That's my background. I started in the blockchain space in 2017, and Ethic Hub is about smart financial inclusion. It's about connecting the real world with DeFi to enable that almost anyone in the world can invest into the small farmers excluded from the traditional financial system. Our mission is to improve the living standard of these farmers through their own productivity, creating regenerative wealth in a win-win model to boost social, economic, and environmental impact, because agriculture is one of the key drivers to stop climate change. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gabriela. And I'm a big fan of the Ethic Hub platform and what it's bringing to the world. I'm a founder of a project called Resource. Resource is a system built upon an idea which is called mutual credit. We didn't invent the idea of mutual credit. It's used today to trade billions of dollars of value around the world, but it's used in very sort of like bespoke circumstances to create these credit networks that usually stay very isolated or very local and have problems with sort of scaling as a legitimate economic alternative. So Resource set out to look at what's really good about these systems. They stimulate local economies and they solve the problems of access to credit in places where there is no existing liquidity or traditional credit data to back that credit. And we built this protocol that basically then solves those core problems and enables this future where we have the ability to trade locally anywhere, but still be part of this sort of global knowledge commons. And so Resource is a platform that enables anyone to start one of these networks themselves, but still plug into this global credit ecosystem.
Sounds great. Thank you, Gabriela and Ashley. Myself, as I've mentioned, I work at the Cello Foundation. So Cello is a layer one blockchain. our mission is to create a financial system that enables conditions for prosperity for everyone. We consider ourselves as the tech layer where projects like Epic Hub and Resource Network build. And I think we're proud to distinguish ourselves as a community, not just revolving around the technology, but also around the mission. And so, like, we're proud to have projects like Epic Hub and Resource Network who go out there and really confront real world use cases, real world problems, and see how Web3 and decentralization can find new solutions, no? And create value. All right. So in our discussion today, I think there are several concepts, and of course, the last thing that we want to do is to deluge people with highfalutin ideas, and then we don't understand each other. So I think my first question is let's simplify things. Let's break down the concepts and start with Web3. So I will challenge Ashley and Gabriella to define for us what is Web3 from their point of view, and maybe to make it a little bit more exciting, explain it to our audience in a way that you would explain it to your grandmother, perhaps. So let's get started. Who wants to go first?
I can go, Gabriella. So I think we would start with saying, let's contextualize what we're saying. Most people don't even realize what Web 1 or Web 2 is in the first place. So I start with a narrative arc. I would explain Web 1 as the development of communication, network, information, infrastructure. So starting with things like the ability to send emails and communicate that kind of transcends time and space in ways that we had previously not seen possible, and similarly start to share information in that way. That was our basic kind of information infrastructure. Once we had that in place, now we started to develop Web 2. What new types of industries can we now build on top of that infrastructure? And that enables things from SaaS, so software as a service, to social media, and now even today to things like remote work or people being able to participate in the sharing economy, all different types of logistics. Of course, we're simplifying, but that's the general idea. So now what starts to happen when we have all these different types of industries that exist online, we can start to think about what does it even mean to participate and form societies and communities and workplaces? Can we have a different structure of ownership and incentivizing how we're all working together and forming communities? I think that's what Web3 is at its best, is rethinking structurally. What does it mean for us to participate and create and build industries? And can we do this in ways where we no longer have these binary relationships of citizen and of this one government or employee of this one company, but we're actually part of many different communities and many different organizations and able to attribute our value in a much more decentralized and also sort of culturally significant way.
Yeah, I obviously,
yeah. Go for it, Gabriel.
Yeah, I agree with Ashley regarding the use of this. So I will focus more on the philosophical value behind it, the trust. I would tell, like, again, talking, if I would explain it to your grandma, but depending who your grandma is, so I will do a general approach. If your grandma uses internet to chat with friends and family, I would tell her Web3 is a super powerful internet where you can share not only information, but new units of value, transforming previous internet into a powerful accounting system where you can transfer and keep track of your value in a safe and very trustable way, because no one can lie about the values that has been sent or registered in this blockchain. Mainly, I think the Web3, it's like an internet based on trust, because you don't need a third party to validate what you're doing, because all is within an algorithm and a program that won't allow you to send, say, if you only have 2 points and you say 2 to your daughter, you cannot send another 2 to your son because you already expended them. You cannot fake this transference of value. And Behind this would be all this structure to provide trust into the interactions of people or communities, allowing for a new organization of society. Because if communications, if internet allowed us to make groups to interact and to form communities, Web3 would enable those interactions to be more trustable, more efficient, and to give us the tools to organize as a collaborative society. I would say if internet, which is called Web2, it was about competitors, Web3, it's about collaborators, about enable the tools to collaborate and work together in trustable ways.
Yeah, fantastic. I like what Ashley was demonstrating, kind of like the evolution, right? I saw this shorthand in online before. Web one, you just read. Web two, which is what we have right now, you read and write. You can post, write comments, or like what we're doing right now. And then Web three, as Ashley was mentioning, it opens new ways for us to participate and also to own. And so like you all have this discussion of, blockchain ledgers and like value, which goes to Gabriella's point about like value, right? Being able to represent value in the internet and being able to trade it in a way that, resolves the issues of trust. And so it's an exciting evolution of like the digital economy of the digital world. And I guess the question for us now is like, once we have this technology, like blockchain, cryptocurrencies, NFTs, this whole gamut of like technologies, we want to relate it to the issue at hand, which is financial inclusion, which has been a decades old, centuries old problem, perhaps. And so the question is, if we have Web3 as an evolution of the technology, what is its benefit to financial inclusion? Why does financial inclusion need Web3 or even decentralization? What is the use case that we're working on? And perhaps like I'll ask this to the panelists. Maybe you can relate this to the project that you're working on, right? Like, why is Web3 a new approach to the subset issue within financial inclusion that you're working on? Maybe Gabriella, your
Thank you. I think for starter, we need a new financial system because the current one has not been able to serve the whole world. According to the World Bank, a quarter of the world population is excluded from the traditional financial system. This means almost 2 billion people are excluded, and their only source of working capital is the small sharp loans, small and very expensive sharp loans they can find with the communities. And they often pay over 100% interest for this little money they can borrow from their communities. And the shocking news is that 70% of the unbanked are smallholder farmers living in poverty despite producing 1/3 of the world's food, our food. So the problem is that the risk of perception is higher than it really is for the traditional system. These farmers don't have data, they don't have connectivity. It's 1.2 billion farmers in this situation. They don't have connectivity, so they cannot relay, fintech cannot rely on data to make a risk evaluation of them. And the properties they have, the assets they have, don't have a commercial value for the financial system. Also, when they have long-term crops of coffee, which is king of agroforestry, they cannot access microfinance, traditional microfinance, because they are not, so they need to borrow. And if borrowing is so expensive, this is what is called the poverty trap. They practically work from their work. And this, in the case of coffee, as I was saying, is the king of agroforestry, and 80% of the total production of coffee is in the hands of people with 2 hectares of land, excluded from the financial system, from the certification system, and for the carbon credit system, because they are too small. But if we put them all together, as I was saying, the main problem is that because they lack collateral, they don't have the trust of the entities. So Ethic Hub built a robust and sustainable compensation system. This creating crowd collateral to mitigate the perception of risk. This is like a blended finance 2.0. It's like we build a platform where you can lend them not just working capital, but you can also lend them collateral to say you buy your tokens and stake it on behalf of them. So you're willing to absorb the first losses in case of default. So the investors, this is like protecting impact investing. The investors can lend the money without the risk because there's another group of people willing to absorb that risk for a higher benefit within the cryptocurrencies. But the lending happens in a stable coin, so that's not the risk. So the point here is that by protecting this investing, we eliminate the risk because donations and philanthropy are okay, but the problem is structural. The problem is too big as to not to find a solution to enable the incorporation of the base of the pyramid. As I was saying, it's almost 2 billion people. And this has huge repercussions regarding environmental impact, social and economical also, but especially environmental, because the greenest areas of the world is where the unbanked live. So if we need to protect this fragile and very valuable ecosystem full of biodiversity, we need to enable their well-being in order to protect also ours. So this is like a win-win relationship that we promote since Ethic Hub using Web3.
Got it. It's a fantastic story, Gabriela, because basically Web3 enables us to tap the new sources of capital, especially for the unbanked. But I think the technology, as you were highlighting as well, opens up doors for them to access this, right? Like the age-old description as well is like most of these farmers would go to banks and formal financial institutions and will be slapped with a lot of requirements, collateral. But Web3 enabling us to, again, this point earlier as well, is like coordinating globally, right? Like funds savers from a different jurisdiction, maybe Europe or another region, looking for opportunities to invest, may be able to direct their funds and reach the farmers who need it at a cheaper cost and like saving from the intermediation, which I think is amazing and something that was almost unthinkable before. Which is great. We'd love to hear from you, Ashley, like how Resource Network is thinking about Web3 and what do you think Web3 can unlock in terms of financial inclusion?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I look at this when I don't think that Web3 in and of itself solves some of these problems. It's the application of Web3 that can solve these problems. And I think that's very important to differentiate because we're at a financial inclusion week and probably there are a lot of people here who are skeptical of Web3 and for very good reason, because there are many applications that are by no means addressing this. And so I think it's very important for us as the space to start to be very honest about that fact and start to differentiate between a pure technology and then, you know, how it's developed and how it's applied. So in my work, which started researching this core concept in 2014 around the launch of the Ethereum platform, and basically started to look at how do you build blockchain-based platforms that enable financial inclusion. And one of the like core issues that comes up is the cost of credit and the cost of capital in places where there is no traditional financial infrastructure. Of course, there's the root cause issues of why is there no traditional financial infrastructure there in the first place. And I think actually to solve this problem, it's very important to go back to the roots of that issue. But I think to save us time, I'll just say, given that we know that that's the fact and that we know that interest rates are unsustainable / become more problematic than helpful in many places around the world, the issue is then the cost of getting that capital to people's hands in the first place. So what Ethics Hub is doing is basically addressing exactly that issue, right? Resource is also looking at how do we systemically address that? And so how do we create new systems that are actually allowing communities to bootstrap their own capital? Because communities have productive capacity. They have the ability to work, they have skills, they have things that they can offer and they can provide. They just may not have the sort of capital or traditional credit data to provide that. And so Resource provides this tool where people can start to build credit through this participation and actually start to earn currency that they can now spend back within the community. So in that sense, what blockchain or Web3 provides to us is this infrastructure that basically enables it to be very easy for a community to start one of these systems, but they don't have to have one central operator. They can all start to participate and own and benefit from participating in those structures. And similarly, they're not beholden to getting credit from one lender. Everyone in the community can start to participate as being a lender in and of themselves, but they don't have to put in capital to do that. They can back it with their own sort of ability to provide goods or services in the future. And what I think is super interesting about this, I'm based in Nairobi right now, and in a lot of these emerging market contexts, there are people who have solved problems where traditional finance has pretty much decided to not touch. And these are things like, if anything from an informal financial kind of savings group to literally just deciding to participate in IOUs with a community that you're part of. And you have different people that you're constantly sort of in these sort of like IOU type relationships, right? So there already is a system that's informal that has been built to solve some of this. And I think that what we're really looking at is how do you actually then build on top of that and help systematize that to the point that actually maybe we don't even need to think about how do we get traditional capital in here in the first place, but we can actually start to bootstrap credit ourselves. What also becomes interesting with that is now you have people who have these blockchain-based accounts. They now have these new types of credit scores that we're able to interpret that are much more community-based. Maybe that can now be used to access the traditional financial infrastructure. So I think that without bringing it back to the central point, we can solve these problems without new types of infrastructure. And we can just kind of apply Web3 to old systems. I think that the real interesting developments come from thinking about what is fundamentally different now about what we can build with a ledger that we couldn't do before, and how will that really enable a lot more opportunities for communities to solve their own problems rather than waiting for impact finance or in the best, or inefficient governments, maybe at the worst, to solve these problems for them that actually I think all of us are starting to see isn't really something we can rely upon.
Yeah, I think that's great. This idea of making money programmable and not relying on like central institutions who often do not have an understanding of local contexts, right? The idea that Web3, the application of Web3, to your point, Ashley, allows these communities to bootstrap, to see what type of flow of money and credit can happen that will really support their well-being as well as like their needs. Again, it's a possibility that was unthinkable before this technology, and we're in the early stages, but we see a lot of like promise in terms of like where it can bring us. I think that's a nice link to our idea that we wanted to bring when we assembled this panel, which is empowering communities, right? Because so we wanted to understand what Web3 is as a technology, what it can bring, how can it help in financial inclusion. But now let's like turn our lens towards communities. Of course, like communities versus individuals versus like bigger countries. Our idea is like financial inclusion made possible through communities can also be impactful, right? But would love to ask you both. The field is young and new, but you guys have been deep working and like testing ideas, scaling solutions. But what has been your learning so far in terms of early learnings, lessons that you've learned on the ground on how this application of Web3 can help? How can it help communities? And maybe I can start with you, Ashley, on this.
Sure. So when I first started speaking with different community groups or organizations, it was probably like 2015, and Ethereum was launching that year. And Ethereum at the time was a white paper that talked about this sort of different, or it built upon the consensus mechanism of Bitcoin and made it much more flexible so you could build more applications. What was super cool about that community where there were a lot of ideas that were thrown around, right? Because it was just idea space. There was not much infrastructure that was built to even start to build these infrastructures. So I think we were conceptualizing a lot of really sort of cool social impact outcomes. Then I started to actually go into the field, and I was working with a community in upstate New York, mostly like farmers in one of the more low-income counties. And again, like in farming in America and also in a lot of places, it's very difficult to be a small farmer. And Gabby has already described this really well. So in that sense, I was really explaining, what Ethereum is and trying to understand from the problems that we know that we're facing as small farmers, are there things that decentralization is actually solving? And it became very clear to me very quickly that the way that Ethereum was architected in that first iteration did not make sense to solve these problems. The farmers don't have extra cash to buy ETH to participate. They don't have extra cash to buy miners. And on top of that, they don't have extra time or probably even willingness to use those times in that way. And so I started to, I think, be aware of a disconnect between the potentials and what was happening on the ground from a very, very early moment in the history. What has happened since then are projects that have now started to take that initial infrastructure and repurpose, like what the Celo ecosystem is doing. However, it still is a very small part of the ecosystem. It's not the dominant part. And I think that was the sort of difficulty in the beginning, because I think that the core parts of the space of why people got to Web3 in the first place was social impact, and still seems to be sort of a narrative that's told, but has become, I think, in practice and in actuality, something that's kind of challenging for a lot of people to navigate what's actually helping and benefit and going towards the mission, and what's actually kind of furthering the problems that we're experiencing. So I think that's one of the most difficult parts about working in this space, if you have a social impact lens, is learning how to, in and of yourself, get clear with what's impactful and what may be difficult and what may be causing more difficulty. And second from that, how do we start as a community, maybe differentiate between what is Web3 applied for impact and what is Web3 applied to making old traditional models more efficient. And that, I think, is sort of a core aspect in the space that I think the Celo ecosystem, for example, Epic Hub and our projects are, starting to build around. And I think there's another secondary effect of this, which has created, I think, harm for the potential growth of the community, which I think we can start to address by distinguishing ourselves more, is that a lot of the traditional impact space is scared and afraid of Web3 because of all those things I've described, which is absolutely correct and fair. And so I think that the challenge is, how do we grow and scale these models, which are really addressing systemic issues at their core, and differentiate that and sort of support the intersection with the existing impact space, broadly speaking. I think that's our biggest challenge to face over the next few years.
Thanks, Ashley. Gabriella, your thoughts on this question?
Yes, I hope we don't have problems with my connection, because I'm within the farmers area and this is part of the problem. But I would say one of the things I love more regarding this empowering of the communities is the possibility to evolve from an extractive economic system into a regenerative one, which means create more value than the one we extract. Because technology allows us to make a global community So farmers get more benefit than ethic have. Let's say, for example, we take only 2% of every loan. So we need millions of farmers to make our model sustainable, but we can work on a global system while the small farmers cannot. So for me, this is important to connect these huge global technological possibilities with the very local problems. And that's regarding communities. That's about communities. And not also, as I was saying, not also because Web2 was about competitors and now we are talking about collaborators regarding protocols like alliance with other platforms in the space working for impact, uh, but also because like research or Toucan protocol of all the amazing people we are working together to put these pieces and bust, but also organizing the communities because the small farmers rely on the social capital of belonging to a trusted group, no? So they act as the first circle of trust within this theory of games. And it's important that technology doesn't become another way of exclusion. We need to find a way to develop these systems that generate benefits for them, even if they don't directly interact with the technology. It will come for sure. We are evolving, and Celo is doing an amazing job into getting down to the last mile these tools, this connectivity, and this ability to get access to the cryptocurrencies. But right now, I think even imperfect solutions are better than no solution at all because of the problems they have to solve. And this, as I said, pressing problems. In our case, the main challenge has been like we started in 2017. So since we born in the intersection of impact and crypto. And it was like talking with carnivores and vegans. You know, it's a very difficult narrative because both distrusted each other. The impact people, because impact funds are very traditional and the technology was very early, if it's early yet now, imagine 5 years ago. So they distrusted, they didn't understand. We look like aliens talking about decentralized autonomous organizations and this kind of stuff. And on the side of the crypto users, they distrust real life, the real economy. They wanted financial derivative that can be checked out with algorithms and with just digital assets. So I think the real value, the potential of this technology is, as Ashley was saying, into bringing it down, no, landing it into real cases, into real uses, and not just, as I was saying, on financial derivatives and all this word above, but bringing solutions to the current system. And I think that's the main challenge still, but there's a growing community. And of course, we would wish this to go further and faster, because I always said we are in a race against time to stop climate change and to solve these huge problems we have. But I think the point now is to make clear that there is a huge blue ocean opportunity into using this power technology and these powerful communities within the crypto space and connect them as catalysts of development to solve real world problems, and also increasing the resilience of this economical system by leveraging on each other. Like, for example, in this crypto market, which is like low markets within the crypto space, the traditional investors are looking that, or the yield of our platform, it's very attractive, when before they were laughing because we offer an 8% annual return. Yeah, but our return comes from the real economy, from the farmers, in this case, in this stage, from the coffee industry, and not from derivatives from the blockchain. So I think it's very important to build stronger communities, connect in these two spaces to boost each other. And so crypto winters won't be longer that, because we have refi springs, regenerative finance movements, and people that is building even when the markets are low and adapting and bringing energy to both sides by connecting and by collaborating.
I love that, and I resonate a lot with both of you in terms of like really finding real world use cases for the technology, right? Because that's the path to sustainability. That's also the path where we can gain credibility, as well as like trust from the world that we are not only here to play around with the novel technology. We're here to develop actual solutions to real problems, tricky problems. Yeah, I invite our audience to start posting their questions, your comments. Uh, the most difficult ones, I think we've got experts on in this call right now who can share their experiences about Web3. But yeah, just like pointing out also what um, Gabriela was saying about like the ability to create a system that's not old, that departs from being extractive, but actually like starting a new system where there's regeneration and like we can create value where there's more value to those who need it more, instead of it being captured by certain institutions. But again, also, I think both of you are saying, of course, because we're very early in the technology, we've experienced risks and hiccups, right? We've experienced problems and also like failures. We wouldn't be quiet and shy to say that I think the news right now, crypto got a bad name, right? With all the security problems as well as like the breaches and all like the failures that may make a normal person or someone who has heard crypto for the first time or blockchain and Web3 in general skittish, or like afraid. Uh, yeah, would love to hear from you guys. What are the risks and hiccups that you've seen so far, or like you've experienced that you've learned from as well in your journey in applying Web3 for financial inclusion? Maybe Ashley?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, working in this space, I would say it's been mostly risk and hiccups, especially, given getting involved with, starting with researching alternative economic models in the first place and why they don't scale, which is where my career started at a think tank out of college. And even that in and of itself was basically encountering something that seems potentially such a good solution for so many of our core root problems in society that are defined by many experts in many fields, right? It's like we all have these sort of convergent root level problems that I think are identified by many types of social thinkers. And there was also this sort of alternative economic models of how do we organize ourselves differently. And that in and of itself is just a hiccup. How do you solve that problem? And I think then the secondary hiccup that's come from that is exactly what we were just talking about, is rather than be honest with ourselves about what we're doing in the space in terms of saying we're actually here to solve those problems, there's become the ability to speculate on who's going to solve, or sorry, the ability to speculate early, which is a new thing that crypto offers that's different than the traditional way of investing, has enabled much more attention around that fact, in terms of building community around financial incentives, and rather than building the community around sort of long-term sustainable initiatives. And that's kind of interesting too, right? Because that's the core problem that I think is underlying a lot of our issues in society, is that we have built all these systems that reward short-term action, and we haven't built a lot of systems that are rewarding like long-term development of systems that are developing environments and communities that are actually more livable or enjoyable for the long term. So I think, like, given those facts, I would say the fundamental risk and hiccups are how do you navigate that in and of yourself as a founder, as a builder, as an investor. How do you even deal with that in and of yourself, given that maybe you're an investor but you have LPs, and like how do you make that case to them? And so I think the most challenging part is that we are fundamentally building new culture around building new systems, and doing that is very, very hard work. And there's also money involved, and we're also changing the idea of money. And so I think that the most interesting things that have come out of this for me have been being patient with this and understanding that the vision of what, what resources, and broadly, I think what we could call like transformation of economic systems, and in terms of the best name I would give to Web3. I think the lesson I've learned is that this is a very long-term process, and it is so different than building a quick company with quick returns in a traditional way. And so what does that mean for like a founder, for investor? You have to get scrappy. Maybe think about other revenue models that's kind of support you to get to the long term. So that's one example of that. Think about different types of business structures that are outside of the traditional norm. Explain that to the people who are giving you money to invest, of why that's important, why you need more R&D type investments, because who knows what's actually going to come out of this. But the sort of like pilot projects that may be developed from that money are potentially the most interesting things, right? The things that don't fit the traditional boxes are probably the ones that are going to provide the most value in the new sense. So I think that's my lessons and learnings, and what I tell myself every day and every morning, and every time I'm like, how do I navigate this new challenge each day?
Yeah, we're slaying a beast here, and we're trying to rethink an age-old financial system or like economic system, right? And it's something that does not happen overnight, as you've said. And so, like, patience is always a virtue. Yeah. How about you, Gabriela? Like your thoughts on this?
Yeah, for me, I would say we have internal hiccups and external hiccups. The internal were about building trust, being pioneers, working in something so innovative that nobody else understood what were you talking about. So this building of trust is still going on, as Ashley was saying. There's a lot of bad press about the ecosystem. So we are still on the way of convincing the traditional impact investors, all this huge amount of capital there, that here is the path to accelerate the solution of the problems they were intended, and to make them feel comfortable about trusting what we are doing. That's still a huge job to be done. But then external hiccups like COVID, like Ukraine wars, that hit the financial ecosystem, not just the traditional one, but everybody. That lots of the things that you build as an entrepreneur, as a startup, you get back down again after these global movements, global problems. No? So we focus on turning something that we call, in Spanish, the translation would be make virtue out of need. So in the case, for example, when COVID hit, we bootstrap, we make a spin-off about trading coffee, because we were focused on providing affordable working capital for the farmers, and also collateral. But then we realized that giving them access to added value markets increased the impact they were receiving, because it improved the price they were getting, and also obviously their income and the quality of their projects. And that's not something that is scalable, because that would be an SME or something. What is scalable is the protocol, but we leverage on both, because as Ashley was saying, you have to look for ways to keep moving forward, because it's challenging. Every time you think you have everything solved and you have your runway secure, then something comes that changes, and we need to have the ability to adapt to these changes, but not just as entrepreneurs, but I think as human beings, because the world is changing very fast, and we need to develop this ability to adapt to these changes for good. No, the other thing I would say, it's an important learning, is that you have to be in love with the problem. So focus on finding a solution for that problem, because quite often entrepreneurs fall in love with their solution, and sometimes it was not the proper solution. So you need to iterate, you need to evolve, to change mindset, to change angles, to get feedback, and to find another way of watching the solution. But the problem is there. So in this case, working with financial inclusion, the problem is there. It's a huge problem, and as we say, there's problem for everyone. We are not competitors, really. It's a huge space to be solved, and it's a real problem. So I would say that if you want to start building something, focus on solving a real problem, get inspiration into the SDGs, because adding value into solving the world problems, it's a good thing. It's a good business to do good. No? So that's why I love Celo's line of prosperity for all, because the others being better has a reflection in ourselves being also better.
Thanks for that, Gabriela, as well as like Ashley. I think we have time for questions, and before we continue with the other like questions for discussion, just to engage the audience. So maybe I'll read the question loud, uh, and then would love your thoughts. So the first one is about regulation, our almost favorite topic as well. So regulatory oversight of crypto slash Web3 is hotly debated right now. Do you think this is a priority right now at this stage of the development of the market, or is it too early? If you were a regulator, which areas would you prioritize?
Well, I can give my piece of thought, thinking about the regulations. I think regulation is always behind innovation. It's not possible to regulate something that is not still created. Imagine trying to regulate the internet when there were only emails and pretending to regulate the social networks. It's not possible, no? So, but it's normal. It tends to happen like that. And once there are use cases built and it starts generating benefits and income, then the regulator comes here. So I think regulation shouldn't constrain innovation and development. But I think there is the need for a regulation to protect users, but not of the future, but of the present. I mean, if something it's a scam, if something it's a thief, I mean, we have regulated that. It's evident you made something wrong, and that should be. We have rules for that already. Either if it's happening in with cryptocurrencies or with fiat money. So I think there should be accountability for what the people is doing in this market. But this not necessarily means that you have to constrict the evolution of the innovation, because it's a powerful tool and we need to provide the space and provide the ground for this to evolve as a tool. And at the end, technology is just a tool. So if we use it for good or for bad, it depends on the purpose, on the incentives. But at the end, it's just a tool. So I think regulation, it's something that should enable the growing of the system while protecting the evident case of scamming and these problems. So that would be my thinking.
Ashley, you have a comment on this?
I would say, in short, as a builder, if you build things that are actually solving problems and providing value and not scamming people, that's more important for you to be thinking about, because regulators are probably not going to be angry with that type of behavior. I think it's in terms of dealing with actual scams and things that are going on, yeah, I absolutely think that those things should be addressed. And I also think as a space, the way that we can solve this as an industry, again, is going back to that point of differentiating between what is short-term, speculative, unsustainable value, and what types of projects do we want to support and like gather and rally around and provide more infrastructure. So I think that's the best thing that we can do rather than get too caught up in these sort of debates.
I agree with that a lot. I think in terms of like regulation, my own thoughts would be, yeah, there's always a role for regulation, especially in upholding consumer protection, like against scams as well as like crime. And of course, like nobody in the space with a sane mind would say that they're developing the technology to enable or be complicit to crime, right? Like money laundering. And so to the extent that, there's clarity around like what can be done, and like these are the activities that do not need to that does not have a place in the technology. I think we're open to that. But yeah, just like to Gabriela's point as well, the technology has a lot of promise, and we will learn a lot through experimentation and innovation. So I guess the industry is willing to, or very much listening to regulators as well. But we hope that that type of experimentation, as well as like a free space to tinker, would not be choked, right? Or like would not be limited. But yeah, it's evolving. But it's a given that one goes faster than the other. And as things get clearer, or like the use cases emerge, and that's why we're also focused on real world use cases, because we want to demonstrate that this technology is really useful. Okay, there's another question which I think is interesting. What are your thoughts about the fact that Africa seems to be the ground where Web3 has the best applications, but solutions are being built by non-Africans? Maybe we can actually expand this question more to like emerging economies, right? Like I come from the Philippines as well, Web3 take up, or even in Mexico or Latin America where Ethicub is very active. Um, what's your perspective, guys, on this?
Well, I'd love to say, and I think thanks to Cello a lot for this is also, or not thanks to Cello, but I think Cello is supporting this. A lot of the Web3 applications that I've encountered in Africa are being built by Africans in terms of on and off ramps and payments platforms and freelancer platforms. And of course, I don't know the actual data about this, but I know a number of companies that I've met in person that have been in the Web3 ecosystem themselves and are building solutions. So I would say, of course, I think that the question is coming from a good place. And I think that where I would push back on the question is say, perhaps that the tokens that were created in the first place that these on and off ramps are providing are biased towards non-Africans or non-emerging markets. And that may be a bigger problem. I think in terms of the builders and sort of solutions being offered, I mean, a lot of this technology is open source, right? And because we're still in the early stages of that, we don't have a lot of good tools and experiments to do that. But eventually we should be getting to a place where people can start to repurpose, for example, how Celo repurposed what Ethereum was and built a whole new ecosystem that's focused on emerging markets. So I think that I would say, in terms of the actual building of applications, I think there's a lot of potential to build, and this connects to that third question that this person asked about education and adoption of Web3 in communities. I think we have a lot of potential around investing in the education around developing open source solutions or repurposing existing open source Web3 blockchain protocols to solve specific local problems. So I think actually that's the best part that we have to offer here of Web3. I think where we can go wrong with that is if we are promoting things like, buy Bitcoin and be part of the future of economy. That may be problematic for people who didn't buy Bitcoin early, right? And that's where I think that we start to limit actually what's able to be addressed here. So I love the question. I think it's like getting at the heart of what I would say is how do we facilitate more of an open source ecosystem around taking some of these solutions and actually applying them in ways that are solving problems in different ways that are actually benefiting the local community. And I think that's Web3 at its best right there.
Gabriela, based on your experience in emerging markets, what do you think of the question?
It caught my attention that it was focused on Africa because as the same as Ashley, in my experience, there are a lot of African builders building the solutions for the continent. But regarding this focus on emerging economies, why the most important protocols are being born there? Because this is where the most pressing problems are. I mean, in Europe, having a new financial system or system works pretty well for us, good enough. Anything it's improvable, you can improve, but when the most pressing problems are, we need solutions that maybe are not perfect, but any improvement is better than nothing, as I said before. So imagine you have the problems of Venezuela with your local coin. Evidently, a new alternative is looked for and seek for. That's why the huge adoption in Latin America for cryptocurrencies, because we need an alternative for these problems, not just in terms of cryptocurrencies, but also in terms of the huge problems that need to be solved, like prosperity for, proof of humanity. It's one of the protocols that started there. But I don't want to start mentioning some of them because I will let out some others. But I think that's the main point of this. Where are we going to find communities in the north, the global north, but everywhere, including India, Latin America, everywhere. So I think this is proof that how community is working to solve these problems. And I'm very happy to acknowledge that the solvers, that builders are also within the affected communities, that they are Africans, that they are Latin Americans and Europeans and everywhere. So I think it's a common perception, but I think it's quite a balanced ecosystem in this way.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially because of the coordination, right? Like, I see Web3, one of the nice definitions I've seen as well, I've heard, is like Web3 is a mass coordination tool for global problems. And so, like, we can be in Nairobi, in Mexico, in the Philippines, but we can help people in Ukraine, for example, or like in East Africa or in Kenya, in our chosen communities. And again, this would have been difficult before. And yeah, and like there's like a lot of potential and talent. I agree with Ashley. I've interacted a lot with our community in Africa, and there's just so much talent. And I know that the future of Web3 is really robust and exciting there in the years to come. Yeah, I'm looking at the time. We have a few minutes left, but there's this good question as well, which is about education. And what's the place of education around the adoption of Web3 by communities? And what are the initiatives within your organizations?
Well, I'd like to talk now before it's raining, so I hope the Wi-Fi doesn't go wrong. In our case, we all, I think we all agree with that. Most of the protocols we work, we need to evangelize, to provide education so people don't distrust because of lack of knowledge regarding what we are doing. So in Ethic Hub, we are very focused on generating material and providing value for people to understand. We do lots of webinars and seminars, and we try to participate in these events like Financial Inclusion Week in order to spread word of use cases that are easy to understand because they are linked to real economy. Let's put it this way. And we also have a space. We invite you all whenever you are in Madrid, where our headquarters are. We have there the office where Ethic Hub is working, but we also have not just a co-working space, but a space to build community where most of the big protocols have come to give talks about what they are doing and to engage the community, to learn more, to have it the street level. You know, this is crypto and blockchain. It's not just for techies and highly educated people. It's for everybody because you can provide value not just as a developer, but also as a problem solver. So we need the community to be put together and to engage into building positive solutions. So I think that way we're quite open. If anyone wants to learn more about how crypto can be a catalyst for development or all of this regarding financial inclusion, we're quite open to share what we have learned along this path and to share it with anyone that is interested. So you can contact us through our social media channels, through our webpage, or directly through Stella, which are also part of our community. So in that way, welcome everyone with the questions that we can answer to feedback this ecosystem.
Yeah. Ashley, your thoughts on this, and then maybe also like to wrap it up, like how can people participate or like engage with Resource Network and how they can follow you?
Yeah, I think at the heart of Web3, going back to our first conversation, it's new ways of building community and new ways of building industries and working environments and building value together as community. And so that process requires education that's really around that core focus of what does it mean to build these new types of structures, whether that's savings circles that are using this technology, or whether that's someone starting to build kind of an open source community around mutual credit. So I think there's no future where education is not key to how we build these communities. I would also add that we're still in a really, really early stage of having open source tools and infrastructure that are actually building those communities that are achieving those goals that we're talking about here in particular. So I think that in terms of where we are, in terms of our development, it's going to take a little bit more time. And I think that the best thing we can do is start to outline what we want those future use cases to look like, and us as builders start to build the right infrastructure that's achieving those goals.
Cool. So how do we follow you guys? How do we support you? Maybe you can mention your Twitter or like a website.
Yeah, I'm our website's resource.finance. My email is ashley@resource.finance. And my Twitter is #buck.
Cool. Gabriela?
For me, you can see my name here. It's Gabriela Chang, Ethic Hub. Just type ethichub.com and you get into our webpage. And from there, you can get our social media, the team, whatever. It's going to be, I think, the easiest way. And there's a lot of material about us. So just type ethichub.com and very welcome. It has never been so easy to generate so much impact. So welcome all to this ecosystem.
Thank you. And for us, log on to our website, celo.org. Our social media pages are there as well. And would love to connect and would love to talk about Web3 and how we could push this further to achieve global financial inclusion. So thank you again, Gabriela, Ashley. This has been great. And thanks to everyone who participated in this discussion. And we'll see you around.